Hey Revolutionaries, I'm excited to bring you this week's episode with Andrea Sofia, where we're talking breathwork. Yeah, breathwork. Who out there is familiar with breathwork? Anybody? Okay, if you're out there and familiar with breathwork, raise your hand. I can see you guys, so just raise your hand. Let me see. Okay, maybe there's one or two. Let me ask you a different question. Who out there is familiar with breathing? Anybody? Just raise your hand. Anybody familiar with breathing? Okay, that should be everybody. Okay, a little trick question there. Or you're just not listening, and that means you're probably not breathing. So, anyways, but breath work. Probably most people out there, I'm thinking, are not familiar with it. I certainly wasn't familiar with it, and I'm glad I got familiar with it when I ran into Andrea. It's really an interesting technique. So, really take some time and listen to this episode. I'm sure you're going to get some really interesting knowledge out of it and insight into how breathing can help you and help you unlock and maybe dig inside and break free from some of the things that have been holding you back. Before we get there, I just want to dig into this one topic that or one distinction I guess that Andrea brought up during the episode when we were talking, and that is being a nomad versus being a digital nomad. And I think it's kind of quite curious because, she's got an interesting story background of being a teacher before she got into doing the breath work. And, she was traveling around because she taught at international schools. So she's originally from Puerto Rico. She'd come to the States, to the mainland here for school, and then ended up in Texas, and then was in Lebanon, in the Middle East, and just kind of traveled the world with her teaching skills. So she was always a nomad, but recently, kind of over the last year, discovered digital nomadism and entrepreneurship and started moving into this world. And so it kind of just brought up the idea in my mind of how people are thinking about this now post-COVID. So I think before COVID, people were thinking of being a digital nomad probably as more of a stretch or more fanciful, or maybe a lot of people haven't even heard the term yet, digital nomad. But now I think, post-COVID, where we're all being pushed into the online world and doing remote and communicating more remotely over Zoom and these kinds of things, are people more interested in being a nomad or having the ability to kind of live everywhere? And what I'd really like to do is, if anyone's got an interesting story of themselves being, previously kind of just, settled down, but through COVID becoming a digital nomad, or entertaining the idea of being more of a nomad themselves now that we can work remotely. I'd love to hear your stories of how that's affected you personally. And if anybody out there wants to share it, you can send your story to jimjim@jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com, and you could put in digital nomad story in the subject title. I'd love to hear stories about how COVID maybe has pushed you into this world, or maybe enlightened you a little bit in terms of the value of being remote and having a more flexible schedule. So take some time, and if anyone else out there wants to share their story, again, send it to jimjim@jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com. And if there's some cool ones, maybe I'll share them, at the beginning of some of the future episodes. Or if it's, really interesting, maybe it'll turn into an episode of itself. So who knows? Anyways, let's get to this week's episode with Andrea. This episode of Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution is brought to you by MGS Graphics, a graphics production support firm delivering services to ad agencies, graphic designers, brand managers, retailers, and product manufacturers worldwide. MGS Graphics is not only reinventing, they are revolutionizing graphics production support. So how do they do it? Well, they free up your team to focus on big ideas while MGS Graphics handles the execution. Their skilled experts are ready to jump in when your project load spikes so you can avoid the headaches and extra overhead cost of hiring new staff. Plus, you won't lose out on work opportunities because of delivery and production timelines. Need more than just production? MGS Graphics also has a fully staffed creative team. Ask about their design services and agency partnerships. So, if you're looking for a partner to accelerate and support your business's growth, go to mgsgraphicspro.com/JJRR for 15% off your first project. 15%? That is revolutionary. Go to mgsgraphicspro.com/JJRR. That's mgsgraphicspro.com/JJRR.
Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit jimreinventionrevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim.
Hey everybody, hey, this is Jim, and welcome to episode 73 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. And I'm talking today with Andrea Sofia, and we're talking about breathwork. So, Andrea, welcome to the Reinvention Revolution.
Hi, Jim. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thanks for taking time out of your day and putting yourself in a closet for the interview. So,
Yes.
Maybe you can describe to people where you are right now. So you're in Puerto Rico, first of all. So what's going on down there?
I am in Puerto Rico at the moment. I happen to be in my apartment, and there's just construction around me. It happened to start today. You know how Murphy's Law. Whenever you have to do something, all of a sudden they're fixing the fence right in front of my apartment today.
Perfect.
They have about 30 minutes.
Okay. All right. So you were being nice enough to hey, I'll go into the closet and try to get some good sound for you while we're doing this. So I appreciate that. But anyways, hey, I'm just super excited to talk to you because, we met, gosh, it's been almost maybe a year ago now, down in Cancun, Mexico, at the Nomad Summit. And you were giving this breathwork class there. And so I have a couple questions for you. First of all, before we get into this breathwork thing, which is an amazing kind of technique for everyone out there to learn about, especially in these COVID times that we're all in, where our anxiety levels and stress levels maybe are higher. But a couple questions for you. So, just based on when we were talking before and preparing for this, which I found out that you weren't necessarily into the nomading thing; you were just getting into it. And my impression of you is that when I got there, because I'm still learning about this whole kind of digital nomad scene and exploring travel and these different ideas, I thought you were like a super nomad. That was my impression of you because of these two things I want to talk about. Because you were part of this Selina group, right?
Yes.
that had this really cool experience, I think 2 weeks before the Nomad Summit, and kind of culminated at the Nomad Summit. And you were leading these breathwork classes at the Nomad Summit. So I thought, this girl's amazing. You were like a real role model to me as I'm digging farther into this world and discovering it. But so 2 questions for you. Why did you apply, and what did you think of the Selina experience, and why did you decide to come to the Nomad Summit?
Well, to give you a little background, yes, and to answer that original question, I was new to the digital nomad part, but I was not new to the nomad part. So I think all of my adult life I have been teaching abroad. I was an elementary school teacher, and
Okay.
I started teaching in Texas. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and then in college I went to Syracuse, and then I decided to stay in the States, and I moved to Texas, which it's, if you've never been to Texas before, and it's like a going abroad.
Right. Well, certainly
So
different from Puerto Rico, right? Yeah.
certainly different, yeah.
Yeah.
So I moved to Texas. I was only there for a couple of years, and then I decided that I was going to move to Kuwait and teach at an international school there. And then afterwards, I decided that I love the international lifestyle, right? Being an expat and being able to stay long term and experience different cultures for what they really are, right? Because the difference between being a traveler and actually being able to live in the country is that you make friends with the locals.
Right.
Able to live in Kuwait, I was able to live in Lebanon, and then I moved to Colombia when I decided that I wanted to really pursue this breathwork thing and just try to do it full time. So by the time you met me, you and I met in September,
Right.
and I had quit about that June. So I was very familiar with the nomad part because I'm very used to, getting rid of everything that I own and
Right.
just moving on with like 2 or 3 suitcases and putting everything that I own on an airplane and just going to the next location, which but the digital part, right, the being able to take my work online was very new.
I see. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so the Selina thing
Yeah,
is
how did you
just
discover Selina and the Nomad Summit?
because every time that I would travel, I would stay at hostels, right? Even though
Okay.
as a full-time job, I could afford a hotel. I love the hostel idea. And as I got older, I still wanted to stay at hostels, but I wanted to stay in private rooms. I wanted to have a little bit more privacy. I wanted
Sure.
something that's a bit more fancy.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted the vibe and the being able to share and to meet new people that a hostel gives you. And, a hotel just, a lot of the times it just doesn't, right? It's a different vibe
Right.
to people that go to a hotel.
Yep.
So I discovered Selina, I want to say a couple of years ago as I was traveling through. Well, I discovered Selina when I was living in Medellin, and they opened a branch there, and they had a really nice bar and they had a really nice setup.
I
But
see.
the first time,
And you know what? Can you explain what Selina is in general for people that aren't familiar with Selina, what that is, what it means?
so Selina is this group of hotels right now that they're all over South America, even though they started in Israel, and they cater to the digital nomads, and they're hotels at this point. They started more as hostels, but they're hotels at this point, and they have co-working rooms. They have yoga spaces, wellness spaces where you can do yoga and meditation classes, and they offer the same package basically that a hostel will offer, such as having day trips to different locations. But it's also a slightly more affordable price than a hotel. Because you have the option of staying in dorm rooms. And with COVID, I don't know really how everything is going to change.
Right.
But
Sure.
the moment that I was there, right, you were able to choose to stay in dorm rooms or to choose your own hotels. And a way that I would travel was that I would combine both. Sometimes I would stay in a private room so I could have some time for myself. And if I wanted to save some money, or if the location was, a little bit more expensive and I wanted to be able to eat at a nicer restaurant, then I would stay in the dorm rooms.
I see. Okay. So you were familiar with Selina before this program kind of got, I guess, invented or whatever, or put out there for people to apply to? You already knew the brand?
So Selina does road trips. They've done a few road trips. I think we were on part of the fourth group road trip. They had done it with influencers just to, get the brand name out there.
I see.
And they had done it with some of their employees. But then this time around, we were doing a road trip all through Mexico. So I honestly, I saw it on Instagram. I already followed Selina. I already liked and loved their idea of what it was to, have a fancy hostel.
Right.
That you can go up to the roof and have a drink and then meet people and the same people. You go on like some sort of excursion the next day and you just keep talking, and then you decide like, oh, we're going to travel to the next location together. So, you have the option to do that as well.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really a neat idea. Sorry to jump in here. Just for people that are listening out there that, are feeling like, I would love to explore, I'd love to travel, but it's hard to get your close group of friends to get on the same wavelength with you and get the same time off work or want to go to the same country or do the same experiences. And Selina's kind of set this up in a way, around community where it's like-minded people can find each other and have those experiences. So you don't feel like you need to do it by yourself alone, or you can take advantage of the time off if you get laid off or whatever. It's really an interesting thing, and kind of a preview of kind of looking back at it now of maybe how the world will be changing going forward with, remote work and all these things now that people can choose to live anywhere or maybe travel a little bit more once the travel opens up again. But
yes, definitely. And some locations are already open and they're working. And the good thing is that they have co-working spaces. So you can just rent it for the day and you have an office with really high speed internet. So for example, when we were going through Mexico, we would test out all of these locations in Puerto Escondido and in Tulum, where most places the internet is not that reliable. But, if I don't have internet, I can't work. I can't pay for things.
right.
So that's a must. And Selina has been making sure that the internet is very reliable and that you're being taken care of in that regard. Right.
That's part of their brand of that's what they're bringing to the party. Like if you stay with us, these things are going to be taken care of.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. And this trip was a neat way they designed the trip. Like you said, they were, they had some other trips they put together before you with influencers and such. Part of this trip was you had to document your experience and produce some content, I think, around it. Is that right?
Yes, we had a videographer coming along with us, and I mean, my job essentially was, because I'm not an influencer, right? I'm just helping people, and it just happens that my platform is Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have a huge viewership of thousands and thousands of followers, and I don't intend to have that, right?
Right.
It's a niche what I do. But I did have a videographer, and our only job was really to document having fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was all very original fun. Like, we were able to experience a lot of the trips that the off the that place, that location would offer.
Right.
And it was just a really, really fun way to see Mexico with a lot of like-minded people. And so it ended up that the last location was in Cancun, where the Digital Nomad Summit was happening.
Right.
So we were able to speak and talk about our experience and what it was like to move to, at least for me, what it was like to change from being a full-time teacher with a job that just so happened to be internationally, right? Because I worked at American schools around the world. So it still
Right.
had that 9 to 5. I didn't have that flexibility of being a digital nomad.
Right. Right.
And I was able to talk about that during the conference.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I was really impressed with everyone that was part of the Selina group that was on the trip, and just hearing their experiences. It's super motivating and interesting, and it's like every one of you were real role models, like to me, of like, wow, this is wild how the world is working, how you can do this, and everybody has really interesting mindsets, because you have to be open to doing this in the first place, open to the travel. I mean, it was really like, it's interesting. That's why I thought, like, this is cool. That's why I think one of the reasons why I was attracted to attending your breathwork workshop, because it's like I kind of knew who you were, because you're like, oh, I think she's part of that Selina group. That's why, like I said, I'm like, I just assumed everyone in that Selina group, these are super nomads. They're like the people that you want to be like, like if you're going to the Nomad Summit or whatever. And so, I don't know, it's just interesting to me. So my second question for you is, was the breathwork part, was that part scheduled within the Nomad Summit, or was that just kind of a serendipitous, great add-on since you were there and part of it?
No, that was definitely an add-on. I saw the location and I said, I mean, if you remember it, we were just right in front of the lake, right in Cancun, and
Oh,
it
it
was
was
just
beautiful.
we couldn't go in because of the alligators, but it was just so beautiful.
Right. That's right. I forgot about that. Yep.
Yeah, and the space was free, it was available, and I just figured it was a good way to share this gift, right? To
Yeah.
make sure that it start, because one of the things that breathwork does is that it really opens people up to talking and to having conversations. So I just talked to Johnny, who was the person that was, creating the digital nomad, putting together the conference.
Yep.
And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. And the space was available in the morning.
Yeah, it was great. It was kind of an activity space where they hold yoga classes there, and other things. So it was really a perfect space, kind of a little bit of a classroom setting, but it was like open air. It was really nice, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so tell people what breathwork is. So this was my first experience with it. I really had no idea about breathwork, and I thought, well, I'm at this thing, other people are going. I kind of knew who you were as part of the Selina people. I'm like, well, she's probably pretty cool because she was part of that team. I'll go and check it out. And it was awesome. Like, as a first-time experience for me, it was impactful. And then I think I came back the second day, or like maybe 2 days later, did the class again. Mm-hmm. But for people that are out there that are wondering, breathwork, what are you talking about? Like, can you just explain it, what in general what it is, and then maybe explain your take on it or what you do with it?
Right, because most people, they say breath work and they say, oh, I already know how to breathe. Right?
Exactly. Everybody knows how to breathe, duh, right?
That's the first thing that people will tell me when I say I do breath work, and that I teach people how to relax, how to manage their stress and anxiety using their breath. And so the first thing that I reply is, no, you probably don't, right? Because most people actually don't know the power that is within their breath, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you just close your eyes for a second and you observe how you're breathing,
mm-hmm.
chances are that the moment that I said that, you're automatically changing your breath because you realize you're not breathing enough.
Right.
Right. So what breath work is this like super powerful meditation But it's not a meditation because your only job is to follow this breathing pattern. And within like 5 to 10 minutes, your body goes somewhere else, right? You go into your subconscious mind, and then you're able to access all of these different parts of you that have been hiding. So there's a lot of
Okay. Wait a second. Okay,
mm-hmm.
just to stop you there, because that sounds like a little bit of like foo-foo or fanciful.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what that means a little bit? Because I thought this was a little, like, I heard you describe the class beforehand, before we did it, and I was like, okay, well, I'll see what happens. But it's really true of this kind of access that you get. Can you like go deeper on that point for a second?
So breathwork, to make it simple, breathwork is a powerful meditation for people who don't know how to get into meditation, and it helps people process emotions, process problems, traumas, manage stress and anxiety. And it does it in a very powerful way. Is that a little bit better? Less woo?
Yeah. Yeah, because, well, okay, here's maybe an analogy for people that are listening out there and thinking like, whatever, I know how to breathe. What could be different about breathing? Similar to yoga, for example, for me is how I think about it, where it's like people kind of maybe have this impression about yoga too, and they're like, well, sure, it's a workout, whatever, but there's, the benefits are physical, and it really doesn't do anything more than that. But if you talk to like a person that's done yoga, they're a little more relaxed, a little more hippy dippy, a little more happy. There's certain mind effect things that you get as a consequence of doing the physical action. So I think in the same way, the breath work, whether you think this will happen or not, or whether you think you have the ability to go deeper or not, the physicality of doing this breathing process has a physical effect on your body, right? And the mind and body work together, and so that's what allows you to kind of go deeper, process some emotions maybe that you've been pushing down your whole life, really, or burying, or get to that anxiety. So I think that's really interesting to understand for people out there. So,
right. So while you're doing a session, your only job is to follow a specific breathing pattern that I'll give you at the beginning, and there's a mantra that I'll keep repeating. And after 5 to 10 minutes, you're not aware of time and space anymore. Mm-hmm. Your body, you're just lying there and you're breathing, and you might have emotions that come up. You might feel sad. You might feel happy. You might feel anger, and you don't even know what the story is. And it's just about releasing and sitting with those emotions that there's really no point, right? Whenever we live in a society where we've been told so many times, like, oh, don't cry. Oh, everything's okay. Oh, let's just be happy.
Right.
And the body automatically just pushes all of those emotions back, right? Even the happy ones, because we're not allowing ourselves to really feel the whole spectrum of feelings that we should have, right? And then when we do that, that's when the anxiety sets in. That's when we begin to feel as if we're not worthy. So what breath work does is that it releases those stories. And a lot of times it'll go back to, I'll have clients, and that's the powerful visions that I've had myself. Like, I'll remember things from when I was a little kid. Mm-hmm. For example, there was one time when I was in kindergarten, and I remember vividly, like, this girl taking my pencils away, and I didn't fight back. I just said, like, okay. And I was in just so shock, and I was crying as I was breathing. I was crying for my, kindergarten self,
right?
Because she couldn't stand up for herself, right? And then life is a cycle, so we just keep going, and we keep repeating these same things until we have the chance to say, no, that belongs to me, or you're not taking that away from me.
Right. Well, I think it's really, this is so interesting and I think so beneficial for people, because I think most people, we don't understand how to process emotion, and we don't do it very much, honestly. And it might take us years later to process an impactful event in our lives, like the death of someone or getting bullied in school or whatever it might be. And, instead of processing it, there's other behaviors that come into your life for you to deal with it, right? Like you're self-medicating or distracting yourself instead of just allowing your body and mind to process that emotion. That's one thing I've noticed that's always been a benefit of yoga and meditation, especially meditation for me, is that it allows your body to address it and your mind to address those things.
Mm-hmm.
And the breathwork thing is kind of in a way, which I'm not that experienced with it. Maybe you can share this because I know you've done meditation and yoga as well. It seems like it's kind of a short circuit or a more just direct way to go deeper and access and process this stuff very quickly. Is that fair statement or not? That's the way I felt. I've only done it twice, so.
No, that is a fair statement. And before I answer, I'd be curious to what did you feel? Because you had a very powerful session, even though you breathed a couple of times. You had a very powerful sessions when you were doing it with me.
Yeah, certainly the first one, I was just like, well, okay, there's some, your body just reacts in certain ways, which I want to ask you about the sort of a medical aspect to that in a second here. But so like my hands started to go numb and the extremities of my legs started to go numb. Your body just starts feeling different. And, you're kind of in this euphoric state in a way. It's hard to describe exactly how you're feeling. But I remember, I think you were saying, like one of the mantras that you were repeating, I think it was something like, you are powerful.
Mm-hmm.
You are powerful. And I think that's really what triggered a lot inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like crying for myself, for my old self when I was a child. That's like, I never got that input,
mm-hmm.
And it's something I really needed, something I know about myself now, but it's like, and it's hard to tell yourself that, like, you need to hear it sometimes externally, or you need to be, that needs to be addressed inside of you somehow. And the truth is really that everyone has real power within themselves, real
mm-hmm.
personal power. And that should always be the case. That should never be diminished or whatever, but that's just one of my little things that I have to deal with, that I have to process. And so that's what that first session was about for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a very vivid reminder of you repeating yourself as you're breathing, right? And you were actually releasing.
Yeah.
And moving all that energy through your body. And as your hands were clamping up, that happens for about like 30 to 40% of people,
mm-hmm.
their hands would get like claws, and their jaws, they would hurt a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's really done because you're alkalinizing the blood.
Because they're what? Say that again?
Let's say that again. You are alkalinizing the blood.
Okay.
Right? As you're breathing, you're giving an excess of CO2. So, there's this myth that you should breathe more and more oxygen, but studies have shown that it's actually the CO2 that helps you with the longest, right? It's being able to retain or to exhale longer, more than just breathing and breathing and breathing and breathing. So what you're essentially doing in a breathwork session is that you're making yourself hyperventilate. And a lot of times it actually looks like you're having a panic attack,
mm-hmm.
but you're actually breathing into it. And as you're doing, you're moving your body, you're moving all of that energy to release whatever lesson is really trying to teach you, right? So for some people, it might be that you have memories from your childhood, like what happened to you and what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, they just have visions. I've had clients that go through, like, they see Rubik's Cube, or they see like mountains from like childhood that they just, it's just an image.
Right.
Some people, they just cry, or they just start laughing, and they don't really know, because there's just these emotions that just fill them up. And then in some situations, which those are really powerful, and it happened when we were breathing together, people will remember being back in like their mother's womb, or being able to smell what a parent smelled like. So
mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember in the sessions, there was a woman that she wanted to stay there longer, because she was like, I'm back at inside my mother's womb, and she died like 15 years ago, and I could smell her, and I could feel being with her.
Oh, wow.
And it was just so powerful to be back. So I'm okay. And she kept telling me, I'm okay. Don't wake me up. I'm here for just a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I knew there was like a couple in the back row, I think, that was really like, it seemed like both of them were really like, I don't know, just shaking, like really affected somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, I'm not sure what's going on here. This is, it was a little wild. It was a very wild experience for me.
Yeah. And that's also why it's important to do it with somebody that has received proper training, right? They have
mm-hmm.
to understand energetics. They have to understand what it's like to deal with someone with trauma, because
mm-hmm.
you might not even remember what you're about to see.
That's
right? A lot
yeah.
of in our childhood, we might have suppressed them. And it might be something as simple as like, my mom did not pick me up from school, and, I realized that I wasn't a priority anymore. And, then it was okay an hour later, and you're fine. But you still get to cry about that. It still gets to be traumatic.
Right.
Or it might be something more powerful.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because it's like, some of this stuff, it's not so obvious what's traumatic to you when you're just growing up and going through life. Like if you have brothers and sisters and this and that. I mean, your parents could be like, I treated everybody fine. I thought it was okay. But to you, it was a real traumatic event, and only you understand that and have to process it that way.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. Well, okay, so in terms of the physicality, this is what I wanted to ask you in terms of sort of the medical side or the safety side. So two things, I guess, like you already mentioned, like you shouldn't do this by yourself because things can happen to your physical body. You might be more traumatic. You don't want to fall over, or you want to be sitting in a safe place or laying on the ground when you do it, because things can happen. But what about, is there anything physically, like I've heard some things like if you do this too much, you might damage your lungs, or you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain. Is there any kind of medical issue, or if you have medical issues, are there things you should watch out for?
Yeah, I mean, if you're pregnant, I won't breathe someone if they're a woman if they're pregnant, because you're essentially just messing up with the oxygen for the fetus. So I just don't go there, or I'll do something very light, but I'll definitely won't do what we did. That's the type of session that we did.
Right.
And it same goes to anybody that has vertigo. Like I won't breathe my mom. She has really bad vertigo and she'll get really dizzy. I won't go there. If you have heart problems or high blood pressure, that's also something to be concerned about. But it doesn't mean you cannot do it. It means you have to do something that's a little bit lighter, right?
Right.
I mean, if you're giving birth, for example, there's different breathing exercises that you can do to ease that pain. That's known.
Right.
So that's part of breath work as well.
I
and
see.
it can be some sort of an experience as you're, giving birth and being able to breathe and feel and be very present within that moment for a woman.
Right. I gotcha. So how did you discover breath work? I mean, this is not that common out there in the world in terms of what people run into, on a day-to-day basis. How did you stumble into it and decide, hey, this is for me?
It's first of all, it's actually starting to get very popular. If you Google Wim Hof, I feel like that's the most popular guy right now.
Right.
If you watch Netflix, The Goop with Gwyneth Paltrow, he was on her show, and the idea of that type of breath work is it's very masculine. It's a very masculine energy because you are essentially doing breath work. You're breathing, and then you're jumping into glacier water, or you're climbing, Mount Everest. And it's really great for your immunity. And he'll talk about how he got injected with some disease and he was fine. And that's all great. The type of breath work that I do is very different because it's a lot more for healing. The idea is that you don't need, the average person does not need to climb a mountain, right? The average person needs to feel safe enough to get out of bed and do their job,
right.
with their family.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah. So what I do, yes, there's definitely studies. There's some types of breath work, and that's why when I go back and I say, this is not something that you do with yourself by yourself, right? This is something that you do with somebody that has been trained, that understands the energetics behind it, that knows when to stop and where to tap and where to move on, and because there's certainly been complications with the lungs and all of that when you do it longer. Now, my sessions are never more than 20 to 30 minutes. Because you process enough during that time.
I see. Yeah, I just wanted to get that out there because, you don't want someone to be extreme and then hurt themselves or something like that. But so, what was your first experience with it, and how did that start for you?
So I've been into yoga, and I've been practicing yoga for almost 10 years now. And about 3 years ago, I started my yoga teacher training. And honestly, I hated the breathing part. I just could not get into it. I would just sit there and try to focus, and I just couldn't get into the meditation part of it.
Interesting. Okay.
Did not come, the idea of just closing my eyes and focusing on my breath and breathing in and breathing out, I just couldn't do it and just keep my mind blank. And so a friend of mine actually, she saw this online and she recommended it, and she's like, oh, let's try it together. And it was an audio. It was this free audio that this woman was offering.
Oh, okay.
And it was a very light version, right? Like if you follow me on Instagram, those are the kinds of videos that you're going to find, because those are the kinds of videos that you can do without actually having the person present, whether it's via Zoom or actually touching the person.
Right.
But when you're left by yourself to do it, it's about a 12-minute breathing session. And I just felt my entire body tingling, and I could feel like little ants running all over my body. And I said, wow, that was so powerful. And I just feel so calm. And I was in the process of deciding whether or not I wanted to quit my job. And that's actually when I decided, like, nope, we're taking some time off. We're really focusing. And it just so happened that the teacher training for breathwork was starting. So I got certified.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That's a nice segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about, because you said something about you weren't sure about quitting your job, or because you've been a teacher up until this point before you got into this, and really one of the and ever since we met, I've been kind of stalking you online a little bit. Okay, just to be honest with you, I just like watching your stuff. We're Facebook friends and such. And you put this one post up, which I want to read just a few lines from it, because it kind of really spoke to me. And I think this idea doesn't get talked about enough, especially certainly now with COVID. Everybody needs to reinvent themselves a little bit. But the kind of the alternative of not reinventing yourself, which is the question you asked here in one of your Facebook posts: what's the cost of staying the same? So what's the cost of staying the same? So, and this kind of spoke to me because it said, I'll just read a couple lines here, and this is in your voice. The first time I decided I was ready to truly invest in myself was very scary. I had saved some money, but this program would cost me about a month's paycheck. It felt irresponsible. And I've had those same feelings, and I just want to describe, I used to work in the corporate world, so this goes back, 2006, I quit my job. So it's, what is that, 14 years ago? Okay. So I haven't had a job at 14 years. I have been an employee 14 years. But when I quit my job, I was frustrated with the corporate lifestyle. I mean, I loved the technology and engineering stuff I was doing, but there's just some politics and issues with it. And when I quit, I gave myself some space in my life to start thinking about this. And I want to tell you my experience. I want to see if it was the same kind of decision process you came to, potentially. And it's like, I didn't want to take a new job right away because I wanted to kind of rethink things a little bit. And I kind of made this equation of kind of the cost of staying the same. So I thought, well, I can get another job and I'll be more successful the more I work in this environment. And I was making around 6 figures, close to 6 figures back then. And it was a good job, good life, medical benefits, stock options, blah, 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 right? But I like to do a lot of different things, and it's starting to, creep up and really take over your life. And at the end of the day, you're just exhausted because it's a very intense, high level job. I was starting to become part of the management team. And I thought, I can get another job. I'll make more money, but it'll probably take even more of my time. It'll be even more intense. So I kind of had to make this equation, like, is that the right move for me? What's the cost of, or the difference in my life that it'll make if I work less or take a different type of job, but gives me more time to myself? And so that was kind of that was why I've never taken a job since then. And it just happened. I just lucked into this consulting project that has sustained me. So I have a consulting company, and now I'm moving more into the entrepreneurial sphere, like the last 4 or 5 years, with really reinventing myself, taking a full step out of the corporate world. But what was your process when you were thinking about quitting teaching, why you quit, and how you thought about it?
I think for me, well, the post itself, I think you can see it two ways, right?
Yep.
One is the actual, what is the cost of you not changing the way you are, right? Because there's this little voice, and this doesn't happen for everybody. Not everybody's being called to, there's something wrong, change it. Nobody's
Right.
is being called to make a difference, right? Some people are perfectly happy, and that's great because we need those people there.
Oh yeah, if you're happy with where you are, of course, and
If you're happy with where you are, that
keep rolling, right?
Keep rolling. But there's a lot of people that settle. There's a lot of people that go into a job because that's what their parents want them to be. And, I was starting to get more and more into yoga. And I always knew that teaching wasn't for me. Even though I love teaching, even though I love kids, elementary school teaching and having to teach kids math sucked the joy out of me. You know,
Okay.
no, there's no right.
Yep.
I it was not my thing. I could get super creative whenever I was left to do my own projects, and I loved it. But the moment that I had to follow a curriculum, it just wasn't working. And I tried changing and switching things up. You know, it was hard on like my parents, you know, when I first told them like I'm quitting and I'm trying to figure out what else to do, because they were already, but you already live all over the world. You already get to travel every summer.
Right.
You already, like, I at that point I had already visited over 70 countries, and I, you know, how do I explain to people that I'm still not happy?
Right. Yeah. You were living an amazing life that
Mm-hmm.
probably a lot of people just, you know, dream about how could I even make this happen for myself? You were already doing it, but you still weren't quite fulfilled yet.
Yeah. And I realized it's because, you know, you want to find, I don't want to say your purpose, but you want to find your reason to be happy, your reason why you came here in the first place.
Right.
Right. What, you know, you do it from like God's perspective, or you believe in like, you know, something else in general. It doesn't matter. You came here for a reason, right? And I wanted to figure that out. And I found myself, you know, my contract, I had to renew. I had some savings. I was living in this amazing country where I knew that I could live for $1,000 a month. You know, rent was $200. And I said, I can take some time off and figure it out. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Right.
I was also, you know, able to have another part-time job on the side, another teaching job on the side, so that I could have some income coming in as time went by. So that was very convenient. But to be honest, everything changed this year. That's the reality, and for everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
So you have to learn to be able to reinvent yourself over and over and over again. And by that, I'm already very familiar with, because I've moved so much, right? I was a very different person when I moved to Texas. I was another person completely that had to adjust to the culture of living in Kuwait, and then living in Beirut, and then moving back to Colombia, you know, and then COVID happened, and I'm, you know, on my way to Bali, you know, to really start that digital nomad world lifestyle, and just, you know, teach from my computer full time 24/7, and then go to waterfalls during the day. And COVID happened, right? And I found myself moving back into my parents' house, and realizing like, oh, okay, now it's time to be here. And I get to reinvent that relationship with them now, which has actually been very beautiful and very healing, because I haven't lived with them in almost 15 years.
Right.
We're all adults now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you come back and you're really an adult now, even though you know, your parents might still see you as a child in some ways, but it's a completely different experience with your family. I think at that point, you know, you sort of gone away, you come back, and now it's just you relate to each other, you know, in different ways. I think it's interesting to have a chance at that type of experience with your parents, you know.
Yeah, and I think what has helped me, you know, they say if you feel like you're in alignment, spend a week with your family.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's always a little bit rough with my family. That's so interesting.
Yes, and I don't think if I hadn't found breathwork, I don't think I would be the same person now. I think I wouldn't be able to see and to love the situation that I'm in right now, right? To see it as a purpose of reconnecting with my parents who are getting older. You know, we recently went on like a mini vacation to a place near we had a childhood home, and we just all shared stories of how we remember things differently. And it was
that's interesting. Okay.
Perspective, right? Because it also happened that my brother, he got caught up in the middle of things too, and he had to come back. And so it was we're in this weird limbo where it's the four of us back in the same childhood home, and we're just like, okay, this is what's happening now. Wow, and we're probably gonna have a chance to do that again, right? As soon as the borders open up, everybody's going to go and do their own thing.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting. Well, you know, just life is just one great adventure. You know, the longer that you're around, I think you start realizing that what an adventure it can be. You know, so that's really interesting. And like you said, the breath work is just something that can really, I think, open up doors in your mind. You know, and release you from certain things that you just thought were true, or the anxiety that you had, or whatever it is. So it's really interesting technique. I mean, I'm glad I just stumbled into it at the Nomad Summit. So I keep thinking in the back of my mind, maybe I should try that again, or I'll definitely be open to it. And it's gotten me to meditate more. So like
Yeah.
I'd already started meditating, and I really like what that does for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that helps me kind of just, I can even remember that experience, and it helps me kind of go deeper when I'm meditating.
Yes, I actually got into meditation recently as well, right? Because once you're able to access that subconscious mind, all of a sudden meditation becomes easy as well. You understand, you remember what that feeling was like,
Yes,
and you're
that's right.
able to
Mm-hmm.
whatever thought comes your way, right? So, if there's a sadness to it, we're just gonna be like, okay, we're gonna be sad. We're gonna experience this moment for a second. We're gonna figure out what it is trying to teach us, and then we're gonna move on, right?
Right.
It's not gonna stay.
It's not going to stay. Well, that's right. I mean, that's a great way to think about emotions in general, and that emotions are just emotions. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
They just flow through you, but they're not you.
Exactly.
They're a reaction to whatever it is, but it's just an emotion. So, have you seen this? It reminds me, I just watched this documentary called Emotion 2.0. Have you seen that?
No, I'm not familiar.
Oh, it's really cool. You know what? I'll find the link and send it to you after this, or maybe I'll find the link and put it in the show notes. It's really an interesting documentary. It's talking about how emotion and how we process emotion is connected basically to disease. And most diseases that you see out there, it kind of stems back to this idea of we didn't process the emotion right. We're holding on to it. It's driving our behavior. We're self-medicating in all these ways. And this is where most of the disease in the world comes from. There's very few sort of genetic diseases. Like if you have pancreatic cancer, like your children might have it, because that's like a real, one of the few things that are so directly linked genetically. But everything else is basically a product of your environment, and it's like what you're eating and how you're behaving, and that all comes from your emotions. So it's pretty interesting documentary. I'll send it to you, and for people listening out there, I'll put it in the show notes. So, sorry, just reminded me about that. I got excited about it because I just watched it, but yeah, really cool. Well, we got a few minutes left on the podcast here, but there's always a couple questions I like to ask people that come on, because it's I just love this mix of mindset and entrepreneurship and reinvention, and one is about technology and the business and entrepreneurship side of what you're doing. So being a digital nomad, or now it's just more important maybe to just be able to understand how to work from home and use these technologies. How do you think about the technology, like dealing with Instagram or dealing with Zoom, or how are you thinking about that, and what's your approach to it?
I think it's so important to set some boundaries around it early on for your mental health, because it's so easy now that we're home, now that everybody assumes that, oh, you can have a meeting at any moment because you're home. It's so important to be able to set those boundaries. And for me, once I recently decided that, my Instagram is not going to be, I'm going to put some hour limits in here. I'm not going to be consuming, because it's really draining on your own energy, right? So it's so important for people to realize and discern what are the things that are, taking away that energy, right? So if you're scrolling just to like numb yourself out,
right?
How is that any different from like another glass of wine or smoking weed? And I'm not saying that those things are bad. I'm saying that those things in excess are just really blocking you from feeling what it is that you want to feel, right? What it is that your body's trying to feel. And so it's this idea that your body is so powerful, that it's medicine, that it's able to heal itself. And then you go back into Zoom, and then, you have to say, no, I'm not going to have a meeting at 8:00 at night, right? This is not the time. Right. Sundays are not the time for you to work.
Right.
And you get to decide, right? As an entrepreneur, you get to decide when those times are and when they're not. So, I in that aspect, I feel very lucky.
Right. Well, that's why I'm asking you about it, because it's, making that transition from a job where there's, more clear boundaries to an entrepreneur where, man, you have to actually make them up on the spot, in the moment, every moment, what the boundaries are. Because you'll find yourself slipping like, oh, sure, I could do it on Sunday. Yeah, that's fine. When you forgot, like, oh, shoot, Sunday's supposed to be my day where I don't do anything.
Right.
but I'm busy in the week, and then you kind of make adjustments, but it's trickier, to kind of stay focused that way.
Yeah, no, but it's so important to do self-care, to practice self-care, and to know what those boundaries are, to know when it is time to shut down your computer, to know when to step away from the screen. Because I mean, and I definitely struggle with this a few months ago, as I was realizing, okay, I'm on my phone, I'm on my computer, then I'm gonna take some time off, and take a little break. I'll just be watching TV. And then I was like, okay, now I'm gonna read, and so I'm on my Kindle, and then before you know it, I'm like, I spend the entire day in front of a screen,
Right.
right? The brain itself needs to just stop and process things, right? To make sure that we're going outside for walks, just to like quiet our minds, and that's really when I started getting back into a meditation practice on top of my breathwork practice.
Right. I was just going to say that's really like, if I can't get outside to work out or go for a hike or whatever, that's my go-to, is the meditation. To like, you know what it does? It reminds you, like, if you don't meditate or just quiet yourself down in a while, like I'll go back, and if I haven't meditated in a while, you realize how noisy your mind is, right? Like, oh my God, like you're just bouncing around in your own head. It's just insane. and,
Yeah.
and when you sit there and just take a chance to breathe and be quiet, it really helps, I think, a lot.
Yeah, and people think that it takes a long time, but really, all you need is a minute. All you need is 1 minute to get started with,
Right.
right? And just focus on your breath, focus on inhaling. I'm going to say that again because that sounded. Focus on inhaling in 5 seconds and exhaling in 5 seconds, and do that for a minute. And then once that becomes comfortable, do it for 2, do it for 3, or set a chronometer and do it for 5 minutes. And then when it beeps, then you're done.
I love it. That's even simpler than, I incorporated a meditation at the end of, let's see, was a couple episodes ago, I guess now by the time this one comes out, episode 71, I think it was. I put a little meditation at the end of that interview episode, and I played a little soprano sax at the beginning of it, kind of to focus. But I did it for 5 minutes. You're saying you could even do it for a minute. I love that idea. It's great. Cool. Well, okay, I got my one final question for you. So this has been, for you, the last couple years of, really shifting around, changing, getting into breath work, kind of having this idea of being a digital nomad, but now you have COVID, et cetera. In terms of trying to reinvent yourself, or the way you've reinvented yourself for the last couple of years, is there a revelation that you discovered, or maybe you can share with people about, how you think about yourself, or something that you learned about yourself, or how you thinking about the world now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that every decision that you make, there's no right or wrong decision. It's just a decision, right? So it's really a matter of trying to figure out what it's guiding you towards and what it's teaching you. It's really meant for you. You're going to figure it out, right? It's a matter of just keep on going. I feel like this past year for me, ever since like I quit my job, I feel very much in alignment, whereas my whole world has not been in alignment at all, right? Whereas, I've had, every time I make a plan, something else would happen, including like, earthquakes, COVID, sandstorms.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Moving back home and having to move 3 or 4 different times and move all of my stuff and figure out where to put everything, if I even want to keep anything. So it's about realizing that there's a lesson to everything, and you just have to like breathe through it and figure out what that lesson is, right? For a long time, I just kept telling myself, oh, I spent so many years being a teacher. And then I was at a workshop and I was looking at everybody adults sitting on the floor, writing down on their journals. And I just had a flashback of like my first graders doing the same thing. And I said,
Right.
Oh, I'm not talking to adults right now. I'm talking to the inner child from all of us that live within us.
Right.
And realizing that those 10 years of teaching experience really taught me to be able to talk to kids, right? And to talk to adults and that inner child that lives in all of us.
I like that. That's pretty powerful. I love that. Yeah, because at our core, we're still just those little kids trying to get along, in the world. Everybody wants to be loved and have friends, and just figuring out ways to connect with each other. Oh, it's so interesting.
We're all trying to figure it out.
We are. That's all we all can do. So, well, that's you said something about being in alignment, which I think. People freak out, and again, just to kind of wrap this up, kind of think back of what this question was, like, what's the cost of staying the same, right? That maybe the cost is being out of alignment, or not being able to fully, explore why you're here. And even though it seems scary or it seems ridiculous to pay $2,000 for a course or to take this trip or do whatever, really investing in yourself and trying to move into better alignment, even though you don't know exactly where you're going, I think it's really fruitful and actually improves your health overall. That's the way I feel about it. I mean, I'm still kind of trying to figure out how to reinvent myself, even though it's been a few years now. I feel like I'll probably feel this way the rest of my life. But as I'm going, I feel more centered and happy because I'm in better alignment. I'm not frustrated like I was when I was out of alignment, knowing there's so much more I can do in this world. I want to spend time on the things I like and give the gifts that I have to people that I run into, But I couldn't do that in that other structure for me, Maybe some people can, but yep.
Yeah, it's about trusting the process, right? And following that inner voice that's telling you it's that way.
Right.
And it looks scary, and it's been a scary year, but it's that way. Just keep going, keep walking.
All right, I love it. Well, let's end on that. If people are interested in finding more out about breathwork, or helping, if they want to talk to someone to help them lead, lead to their path more quickly, how would people get in touch with you? Where would you send them?
The best way is to follow me on Instagram, andrea.sofia.alemany.
Okay.
I post a few lives in English and in Spanish, and I have a lot of content. Most of my content is in English anyway. But because I'm based in Puerto Rico at the moment, there's been some Spanish content as well. But you can do some of the lives with me. You can contact me for any more information. And I offer also one-on-one sessions where we go even more deeper. We talk about what it is that, it's really bothering you, what your goals are. Because one of the things that I was able to get through breathwork was you don't know the answers, but you'll be okay. You're going to be able to sit with it, and you're going to learn something from this.
Mm-hmm.
And even as things have not gotten better, if anything, I feel like, the universe is still testing you and giving you little things that you're just like, oh my gosh, what just happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get to be okay. You get to say, wow, I just survived that. I was able to keep my focus. I was able to keep grounded, and I feel good. I'm able to hold space for other people as well.
Right. Well, there's nothing like the feeling of working through something, of releasing stuff that needed to be released, so it's like, yeah, it was good. The more I talk to you, the more I'm just remembering that experience. I'm like, it was nice. It was an impactful experience for me. So it was really great. Anyways, Andrea, thanks for being on. I hope to catch up with you and talk to you more soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com. See you next time. And remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of. Hey, revolutionaries, if you enjoyed today's episode and today's guest, let them know by commenting on their Facebook page, finding their Twitter handle or Instagram feed, and letting them know you heard them on Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, and tell them what you got out of the episode, what you really liked, or how they inspired you. I know they would get a kick out of it and will help others find the same value that you found.